All right, students, time for geography. So pull out your geography pages. Look at the ones we're doing, if I can, continental forms. So we have these 3 pages. We got quite a bit to do. Like I said in the other video, if it's too long for you, then all you need to do is just take a quick break and then come back to it. So we're talking about the continents. Now we remember what the 6 continents are: North America, South America, Europe, Africa, Asia, Australia, and then of course there's Antarctica. Okay, which is the 7th, but we don't really talk about Antarctica because Antarctica does not support life or human life like the other continents do, so we don't deal much with Antarctica. All right, so what is a continent? Okay, a continent is a large mass of land. Now the continents, remember, take up about 29% of all the Earth's mass. Now what I want you to do, or the surface of the Earth I should say, now what I want you to do on the top here, each continent has someone who matches with it, another continent that matches with it. So you have a northern continent and you have a southern continent. So let's see, if we just look at the map, who do you think North America is connected to? Well, I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to read from Guyot right here. I've got this paper, so let's just read this, because when we study geography, we have to realize that when God created the earth, he created the earth with a purpose. We have now to consider our continents, says Guyot, which I hope will disclose to us some of the hidden influences they seem to exercise upon the life of man, or rather, which will enable us to observe one of those admirable harmonies of nature. Harmony means they work together. So we're going to look at the continents and how they work together, of nature and history, arranged by the Creator himself. Who is the Creator? Of course, it's God. For the improvement of this privileged being. Who's the being? That's us. For whom all nature seems made. God made nature for us. So what Guyot is saying is God put the continents in nature, set them up for history in the way he wanted history to move. If we look at our timeline, you can't see it, but you remember it. If you look at our timeline, you know God is moving history in a direction. And God even created the continents with that in mind. Okay? Now we're going to look at some of the differences between the northern continents and the southern continents. But let's see what he says. The 2 continents thus brought near together always make a pair, the individuals being at once connected and opposite in nature. So here are the pairings. Such are the 2 Americas. So who does North America go with? So draw a line from North America to South America. Okay, because you have the northern and the southern. Now, there's another one. Let's look at Europe. What is right underneath Europe? It is Africa. So draw a line from Europe all the way to Africa. And then of course we have Asia, and then what's right underneath Asia in our map is Australia. And I put a little map right there beside you so you can see it. So as you can see, we have North America, South America, Europe, Africa, Asia, and Australia. So they're connected. And we're going to talk about some of the differences between the northern continents and the southern continents. So when you look at our map, we see the northern continents is North America, Europe, and Asia. The southern continents is South America, Africa, and Australia. So those are you have the northern and the southern continents. So let's look at some of the differences between the northern continents and the southern continents. And we're going to write a little bit about them. So on your paper, you have northern continents. Let me grab my marker here. And for each line, what we're going to do is we're going to write one idea. Okay? Now, it says, let's read what he says and then we'll go over it. The continents of the north are more indented, more articulated. Their contours are more varied. That means they move a lot more. So if you look at the map, you'll be able to see the differences between the northern continents and the southern continents. So for the northern continents, and we'll review this once we come back to class, let's write more indented and articulated. So more indented and articulated, that's on the first line, right? Now more indented, what exactly does that mean? Well, let's go over to our maps real fast. I can carry this thing, and let's just look at North America and South America. Now I want you to notice how, when we're looking at North America, look how it's sticking out. There's a bunch of indentations. Look, it's just more articulated. And now look at South America. It's more, see, it's just more of this, the edges just are kind of the same. But look how in the north, there's a bunch of indentations, things stick out. Look over here at Europe. Look at Europe, the difference between Europe and the difference between Africa. Look how Africa, you know, it's got a clean border to it, doesn't it, basically? But look at Europe. It's a ragged border. It's got the islands out here. It's got indentations. Look at all these indentations right here between in Greece and up in here. Then let's look at Asia. Once again, in Asia, you've got all the indentations and articulations. But look at Australia. All it is, it's kind of it's a lot smoother. So look around in this area. Look at all the indentations and articulations. Okay. So when we are looking at the continents, that is what we're looking at. Now, the contours are more varied. That means the way the edges are shaped is different as well. So there's different kinds of edges. So we're going to do contours are more varied. Okay, the contours are more varied. So you'll see it has some smooth edges, it's got indentations, it's just got a bunch of different kinds of edges to it, doesn't it? Okay, now let's go over to the southern continent. Well, actually, we'll go to that one later. We'll adjust them. Now, it has gulfs, inlands, seas cut very deep into the masses of their land. So this is going to take up maybe 2 lines, okay? So your next one is it has gulfs and islands or inlands. Inlands, seas, cut very, you can go down to the next line, deep into the mass of their lands. All right, so let's go back over to our map and let's look at that one, okay? Let's look at that one very clearly because I think this is a very interesting one. So notice what it said. There's many inlands. So look how this cut. There's a big gulf here, right? Look how the water cuts in. Look at this. Look at this big gulf or this bay. How it cuts in. See, it cuts into the land. You see that? Cuts into the land here, into the land. Now look at Africa. Look how it cut, or Europe. Look how it cuts up into the land, right? And here it is. We got this water right here cuts into the land. This one cuts into the land. A lot of, and you're going to see it. The next one's going to say we have lots of peninsulas. Look at all these peninsulas that we have. Now look at the southern continents. Do you see anywhere where there's a lot of area where it cuts deeply into the land on any of these? Right? Because this right here is Asia. Remember, this is not Africa. So Africa is from here down. So this doesn't really cut into there. So look, and even Australia, there's not many indentations or peninsulas or anything, is there? But up here, look, it cuts into the land, cuts into the land. Look how this cuts way deep into the land. Look how the water cuts deep into the land, deep into the land. Up here, deep into the land. You see all these deep indentations and a bunch of different contours, bunch of different edges, whereas the southern continents are much smoother. That's very interesting, isn't it? All right. Does that make sense? So they're inland seas. They cut very deep into the land. Can y'all get that? And I'm going to take a coffee break because I'm getting thirsty. Now, one thing you mentioned, there are many what? Many peninsulas. So next line would be many. Well, let's make sure we spell peninsulas the right way. Peninsulas. Now, Guyot, he was a scientist as well, and he studied the Earth. Now, notice a lot of this is from observation. He realized that there was the northern continents and the southern continents, and he started to observe differences. Because in science, it's about observation and writing down your observations, isn't it? So we can see all these things for ourselves. We just probably never really took notice of it before. Now, there's many continents. The next one is, this is going to take up 2 lines as well, okay? So there's going to be many. And of course, you can stop and pause the video to write these if you need to. Continental. It's supposed to be a small c. Continental. Many continental islands are scattered along their shores. Along their shores. Now let's go back over there and look at this, okay? Many islands. Now I want you to notice, let's look at Africa. How many islands off the edge of Africa do we see? We see one big one here. But now look at Europe. Islands, 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 island, 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 island. Look at all these little islands. Look at island. Look at Asia. Look at all these islands, islands, islands. All these islands belong to Asia. Islands, islands. Look at this island. And let's look here. Australia doesn't have hardly any islands. I mean, these are technically Europe, okay? Look at North America. Island, 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 right? Okay, here's some, but now look at South America. There's very few, isn't there? You see? Very few islands, okay? So that's another difference between the northern continents and the southern continents. The northern continents have a lot more islands scattered around the edges. Okay, and I'm going to erase these because you've probably, got our board dirty again. Just cleaned our board. I'm going to have Josiah, Samuel and Josiah help me clean these. These erasers. I think we need to clean them more often. Let's get it clean up here. I think I'll use a paper tissue for now. Okay, so let's go to the next one. Let's put it's more open to maritime life and commerce. So the next one's going to take 2 lines as well. So it's more open to maritime life Maritime life means life on the sea or having stuff to do with the ocean, okay? And commerce. Now, commerce means like selling things. Like you're going here and selling something and going there and selling something. Let's go back to our map again. Well, you guys are making me walk a lot today. Okay, so notice how a lot of the, well, let's even look at North America. Look at all the see, can y'all see it here? Look at all the indentations, okay? You see all these indentations? What can go up into these indentations? Ships, can't they? So ships come, and there's a lot of commerce. Ships go constantly backwards and forwards. Look how close Europe is, and it has rivers and everything. So it's got a lot more advantage for all these countries to be able to have trade and be able to trade with other countries. How would this country trade? It couldn't do anything with boats, or this one, or this one, or this one, or this country, or this, well, that country probably could, or this country, right? There's this country, or this country, or this country, because they're not even next to the ocean, right? Same over here. You've got countries that aren't close to the ocean. Here, this country is close to the ocean. It's just easier for boats to sail around and to have commerce, to be able to trade things. So it's not saying it's impossible for South America and the southern continents to have that, because they do have that, especially more now than when he wrote this. But still, it's easier for the northern continents because it's so much more, there's so many more indentations and contours where boats can come in, you can create harbors, you've got the bays, you've got the gulfs, stuff like that, okay? All right, next one, it's more consolidated. What does consolidated mean? It means it's packed closer together. Okay, now if you look at Europe, we're not going to go to the map, but all those countries in Europe are just packed close together. The countries in Europe are packed close together. Okay, now we will go back to the map for this one. These continents spread let me spell that right, put a good R there. Spread, they spread upward or up and outward. Now we're going to review a little bit of this when y'all come back. Okay, now let's go over here and let's look at the map. All right, so notice how in Europe, in North America, it starts here and it goes up. And look how it starts smaller and it gets bigger and it spreads out. It spreads out. Asia spreads out. Do you see that? Okay, whereas we're going to see the northern continents start bigger and they go to a point. Start bigger, go to a point. Start bigger, it goes to a point, it goes to a point. You see? So here it gets bigger as it goes upwards and it spreads out more. Here they just don't spread out because they have less contours. All right. So spread up and outward. All right, that's the last one for that. Let's go over, is everybody's lines filled up? Your lines should be filled up. Let's go and look at the southern continents. Let's differentiate the southern continents from the northern continents. Now, where the southern continent or the northern continents were more indented and more articulated, what are the southern continents? They have massive, or they're massive. They're just big. They're massive, entire, and without indentations. So they're massive, they're entire, and they're without indentations. So you look at Europe, it's consolidated, but it's so many indentations. Whereas South America is just rounded, right? The edges are just solid. Africa is solid. Australia is solid. Okay, they don't have big indentations. They have very few indentations, if any. Okay, I think Africa, it doesn't have any indentations, I think. Okay, whereas you look at Europe, look at how many indentations Europe has. So go on your maps and you can look at those. All right. All right. Now, southern continents have inland seas. Inland seas or deep inlets. Okay, so if you look at the southern continents, they've got those. All right, next line. This is going to take up two. They got scanty. That means not very many. Scanty in articulations. Remember, articulations are things that stick out, right? So like, look at the American map. You have Florida. It sticks out. It's a peninsula, right? Even that little peninsula off of Mexico, it sticks out, right? Okay. It's scanty articulations of every kind. And also has very few what? It's scanty in islands. It's not to say that it doesn't have any. It just does not have as much. It does not have as much as the northern continents do. Okay? And this is a very interesting. It's more remote. Need to put an M there instead of an N. It's more remote and separated It's more remote and separated by broad oceans. Okay, now let's look at this. This is very interesting. If you had never thought about this, look at our map. Look how these two are separated by this ocean. Look how all this ocean here is separated from Australia. Australia is separated by a big ocean. But look, North America and Asia are almost touching, aren't they? Europe and Asia are very, very close. Now, Europe and America are far away, but Asia and America, look, they're very, very close, you see? So those are not as isolated from each other. Now notice that most things happened in the northern continent, right? Jesus came and was born in Asia. The gospel moved with Paul to Europe, and then it moved from Europe to North America because they're more closely connected. They're not as far isolated as Africa and South America and Australia. But now the gospel is still moving where? It's still moving into South America. It's moving into Africa. It's moving into Australia. All right? So y'all can pause that and write those down if you need to. And we're going to do our very last one. And we talked about the shape of them. They taper. Oh, not tapper. They don't dance. They're not tappers. They taper down. What do they taper into? It means they get smaller and smaller and smaller. They taper down into a point. Right? Do the northern continents come down into a point? No, they spread upwards and outwards. The southern continents go downwards into a point, okay? Now, of course, Africa and South America are much more pointy than Australia, but still Australia does have some points on there. Okay, does that make sense? So those are our contrast of Guyot. That's how Guyot contrasts the northern continents with the southern continents. So let me just read to you what he says. The northern continents are more indented, more articulated, their contours are more varied, gulfs and inland seas cut very deep into the masses of their lands and detach from the principal trunk a multitude of peninsulas which, like so many different organs and members, are prepared for a life, in some sort, independent. A great number of continental islands are scattered along their shores and are a new source of wealth to them. So during this time, he found out that people are starting to go to the islands and find jewels and stuff like that there. The southern continents, on the other hand, are massive, entire, without indentations, with inland seas or deep inlets, scanty in articulations of every kind, and in islands, right? And then also, they go down into a point. Now, let's go down to our next point, where it says vertical forms, okay? So we had horizontal forms and vertical forms. So horizontal is when you're looking at the map flat. So you're looking at all the edges. You're looking at the articulations. You're looking at the contours. You're looking at the inlets. You're looking at the seas. It's like looking from the top. Now we're going to be like standing on the land, looking at the land. Does that make sense? So horizontal means you're looking down on it like it's a map, right? Like we looked at the map, but now it's going to be like us standing here, and we look out. You know, we can look out across out through our windows, and we can see what? We can see the mountains. Okay, so this is going to be the vertical forms. All right. Now, what does vertical form mean? Let's define what vertical form means. What is, actually, we already said vertical form. Relief. What does relief mean? It's not like, oh my goodness, I'm so relieved I don't have a spelling test this week, right? It's not that kind of relief. In geography, relief deals with something else. All right, so I got my board clean. Let's see what relief is. Okay, so relief is the vertical configuration of a continent or islands. Vertical means up and down, okay? So let's write this there. A relief is the vertical configuration Now, configuration means like how something's set up. What's the configuration of our classroom, right? Over here we have Samuelito Ramirez when you guys are in school. We have Adrian, we have Isaías, we have Estrella, we have Brielle, Jasmine, Daniela, Josiah, and Samuel. That's the configuration of our classroom, how our classroom's set up, okay? So this is the vertical configuration, the height, right? We're going to be dealing a lot with altitude and height of a continent or island. And you can just fit this on your lines however you want to. You might be able to fit more on your lines than I can. Its elevation varied, that means it's not always the same, by plains, plateaus, mountains, comma, and valleys. Now, students, Adrian, Samuelito, Isaías, capital letters, commas, and periods. Don't forget your punctuation, okay? Notice we have commas when we're separating different things, okay? So the vertical configuration, that means how things are, okay, of a continent or island. So islands have a relief, continents have a relief. Now, how do we measure that relief? Or the elevation, it's elevation, okay? The height of the land, okay? When we're dealing with elevation, it's the height of the land. Are we at the same height as the mountains out there? Of course not. It's a different elevation, but it's varied, means that the elevation changes by plains or plateaus, mountains, and valleys. So, which do you think is higher, a mountain or a valley? Well, of course, a mountain, its relief is higher, okay? So we're going to be dealing with those. We're going to explain what plains, plateaus, mountains, and valleys are. Today, we're going to be dealing with plains. So we're going to go into plains. Next geography, when we come back in January, we'll deal with plateaus, mountains, and valleys, okay? So that's what relief is. Now we're going to continue on that one. The highest and lowest points of elevation in the area. All right, so the relief is the highest and the lowest point. So if the highest point was up here at this mountain and the lowest point was this valley, from here to here, this is the relief of that area. Does that make sense? So this would be, you don't have to draw this. This would be, let me draw it bigger so y'all can see it. Let's say we had the big mountain and then walk down up here and then another mountain and then down to a valley and then up to another mountain and then down to another valley. You'd measure this and then you'd measure this, right? Whatever this and this, from here to here, that would be considered the relief of that area. Okay, now islands have a different relief. So like for an island, you'd measure the highest part. So we're going to eventually, on the next page, we're going to do the relief of the entire planet. It's going to be pretty cool. So the highest level in the area and then the lowest level in that area, and that would be the relief. Does that make sense? So here's your highest point and here's your lowest point, and whatever those 2 points are, the distance between those, that's the relief of the land. Now we could do smaller areas, we could do larger areas, you know, we could do just California, or we could do just the United States, or we could do just Australia, or we could do just Hawaii, right? Can y'all see? I'm getting out of the way so y'all can see on the video while I'm talking. But y'all can always pause it, can't you? Does that make sense? So when we're dealing with relief, that's what we're talking about. All right, let's turn our page over. Now, if you need to pause it, just go ahead and pause it. Let me get out of the way. You can pause the video. Okay, good. You can pause it and you can come back if you need to. All right. So let's look at, and I'll erase the rest of that in just a minute. Let's look at how is elevation measured and what is it called? Okay, now elevation is measured from sea level and is called its altitude. So let's write that. Now we start with a capital letter. Elevation is measured from sea level and is called its altitude. Okay, so it's measured at sea level, the level of the sea on the earth. Okay, now here's an interesting fact. Let me erase this. Here's an interesting idea. So we studied the Mariana Trench, right? One of the deepest points in the Pacific Ocean. And Estrellita, you know how deep it is, don't you? All right, the average depth of the ocean, of the Pacific Ocean, is 14,000 feet, but the deepest level is, I think it's 35,000 feet, 767 or something like that. Okay, so if we measure a mountain up here, and then we go all the way down to the deepest part of the Mariana Trench, which is the 35,000 feet, and let's say this is 29,000 feet high, right? That's a huge relief, but that's not how we're measuring it. The ocean flows about right here, okay? So we're measuring 35,000 feet deep from the ocean, but then from here we're measuring 29,000 feet from sea level. So sea level is where the water is on the planet, okay? So whenever we start counting the elevation or the altitude or how high something is, we don't count it from the lowest point, we count it from sea level. Okay, so sea level would be kind of like 0, and then you're flying an airplane and you're 200 feet high. You're 200 feet high from the sea level. Okay, that's your altitude, how high you are. Does that, hopefully that makes sense. If it doesn't, we'll explain it more. Okay, now where's my? There it is. Okay, now let's look at our next picture. So when we're dealing with the vertical. What is it we're on? The vertical forms, and we're dealing with the relief. We're gonna be taking things from the altitude. So when we say like a mountain is 10,000 feet high, it doesn't mean it's from the bottom part of the land in the ocean to the highest point. It's from the ocean to the highest point. Okay. What is the highest elevation of land? So dealing with sea level, what's the highest point of land? Okay, most of you would know. Of course, let's write it. Mount Everest. And how high is it? On the next line, it's 29,000. Oh, I need to close my 9s, don't I, Samuelito? 9s that are left open are 4s. Okay, 29,200. No, that's wrong. 29,029 feet. Okay, feet from where? Where are we measuring from? Are we measuring from the bottom of the Mariana Trench? No, from sea level to its summit. You should fit all this. You should be able to fit all this on that one line. I didn't fit it really well. Okay, so that's your first line. This would be your second line. Now, a summit means the very top. Here's a mountain. The very top of the mountain, the highest point of the mountain, that's its summit. Okay, so from sea level, here's the ocean. We started at like 0 and we measured up. Its altitude is 29,029 feet from sea level. Okay, that's the high. The Mount Everest is the highest point on Earth. Okay. Now, what's the lowest point? Let's erase that. And I got a picture there of Mount Everest, and I think it's a beautiful mountain. But a lot of people have died. A lot of people have died trying to climb Mount Everest because it gets so cold up there, and if you get super, super high, the oxygen is not as abundant. The oxygen is much thinner, so you have to breathe a lot harder. Okay. Now, what is the lowest elevation? If you didn't get that, you can pause it, rewind it. What is the lowest elevation? The lowest elevation is the Dead Sea. Put a capital. And when you come back, we will locate all of these on a map. Okay? We might even just do a map of it. Okay, the Dead Sea. Now, what is its elevation? Now notice it's 1,360 feet below sea level. So it's actually, so the land, so you have, look, you have the land, the water like this, and you have the land here, right? You have the water, you have the land continues. Well, then all of a sudden what happens? The land goes down, right? So it goes down like this, and then the Dead Sea is down here. So look, it's actually, here's sea level, it's actually below sea level. But that's because the water can't get over this area, okay? That's kind of interesting. It's 1,000 feet below sea level. So that's the lowest, but that is the lowest point on Earth, okay? Lowest point from sea level. Of course, if you go into the ocean, you've got the Mariana Trench, don't you? And the other things. All right. We're going to stop there for today. If you want to, you can go ahead and watch the next. I'm going to go ahead and make this into 2 videos because I'm going to go over planes on the next video. But so if you want to stop there, you can. And I'm going to have the next video coming up in a minute. All right, boys and girls. Talk to you soon.